Hi, I'm Rosemary Armeo, and this is a very important episode of On the Brink. We're going to talk today about abortion. And by we, I mean women. All women. I've even kicked off my beloved executive producer, Zach Brady, because he's the man. And I want you to hear from women on this. Women of all types. We have different political views, we have different backgrounds, we have different careers, but we all agree that abortion is an issue that touches us all and that we all have to be concerned about. That's what we're going to talk about today. With me right now is Malia Carreker. She is, for many years, was a spokesperson for Planned Parenthood, still an activist on lots of feminist and political issues. And also Christine Promomo, a retired nurse, although not an OBGYN, she tells me. An active political activist and a strong feminist. And we have a series of questions. We could probably do 2 shows on this, I'm sure. But let me start off with that issue I've already raised, Christine. I cut out the men on this because I used to not even talk about abortion at all to anyone who didn't have, or at least aspire to have, a uterus. That's not completely fair, though, and you're the mother, as I am, of sons, and you talk rather compellingly about the need for men to join this effort. Can you talk about that more?
Thank you, Rosemary, for inviting me to being on this very critical podcast. This is a terrifying issue for all of us, families as well as individual women. I believe that we should not be discounting or minimizing the impact on men and families in the reproductive freedom issue. I personally have family members that, some women that were pregnant, that had pregnancies that were very difficult, required intervention during the pregnancies. The husbands with the small children at home, mind you, you have to think about families, what happens if the mom isn't there and they're of work, the parents are working, what happens? And the husbands, the difficulty and the stress on them when their wives are in distress and not able to access the medical care, which is what the abortion issue is all about. It is reproductive care for women. Mm-hmm. So I hope in the future we'll see a program on, the men being included. I did happen to see in today's Times Union a letter to the editor that kind of brought it home. A gentleman wrote a very short little abortion is not a state level issue. This was written by a man, and it said, former President Trump has now decided abortion rights should not be decided at the state level. Why not county? Why not village? Better yet, why not let the decision be made at the individual level, recognizing that the right to decide is a personal choice?
Oh, amen. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Amen,
that was
indeed.
It. And that was written by a man. So I happen to be married to a very pro-choice, supportive husband myself. So these are the kinds of things I like to see.
Okay, I will also take volunteers. If you're listening to this program and you have the male sort and you want to speak about it, get hold of me and I'll take up Christine's idea of a program on men talking about abortion. Blue, I have a different question for you. Can you tell us, from your experience, what are the implications of forcing a woman, or worse still, a girl, to complete a pregnancy that she does not want?
All right, well, first I want to say that I have 2 sons. They are 42 and 36, and they are fierce abortion rights defenders. I believe that men are important in this battle, but they are not the ones who should be making decisions and making laws about what a woman does with her body. The implications of forcing people into pregnancies that they either do not want, cannot afford to care for a child, may pose very difficult problems during pregnancy, and particularly young women have a much higher rate of problematic pregnancies. What it means is One, you're putting a family in a very, very stressful situation. You're putting a woman's life, no matter what her age, but particularly young women, you're putting their health at risk. You're putting their families in a terrible situation. And in particular, history has shown us that women of color, that poor women are much more likely to find that have difficult outcomes and problematic pregnancies. And when you begin to write the kind of laws that are being written now that are using non-medical vague terms to outlaw what women do with their bodies and what doctors are able to do to intervene and help with problematic pregnancies, you are risking the lives of women.
It's so true. Do you want to add anything to that, Christine?
Yeah, just to what everything that Blue said, absolutely. But folks, I'm not sure are aware that Albany County has a bill that's being considered that is called Local Law D. And it's actually kind of focused on what you mentioned, Blue, in terms of trying to steer or force women or make women feel like they should not have an abortion. And this bill actually has, I think, 6 county legislators that are sponsors, and they are directing this at organizations that call themselves reproductive health centers or crisis pregnancy centers. And people are under the impression that they are medically accredited because oftentimes they present themselves that way.
Right.
There is an organization in the Capital Region that's been around for quite a while, and I learned about it decades ago by attending, unbeknownst to me, a fundraiser for that organization, which I promptly left when I found out what we're all about. But these centers are, kind of dressed up as being healthcare centers. They use a lot of information and they obfuscate a lot on, what reproductive matters and what they do at their facilities. So this law is something that wants to have them provide a post. They have to post that they are not currently post notices, I guess, that they're not a medical facility. They don't have any medical staff there that is available. And therefore,
it's even worse than that. They actually make no bones about the fact that they do not give out information about abortion.
Oh, they do not.
It's all about scaring you to not having abortion.
And this local law would require them to provide that information about abortion care and contraceptives. So there's a lot of controversy on it, of course, surrounding it.
This is to me no different than the 1970s when abortion was it was not allowed. It was pre-Roe v. Wade, and women still had abortions. You don't stop abortions by outlawing or banning it. They were again, as they are now, forced to tell their tales of woe, what I went through to get an abortion, and they were almost required, it seemed to me, to feel sorrow, to feel regret at having done it. And the women, and we knew many of them in our group who had abortions, did not feel that way. They did not feel like they had done anything other than to be true to themselves and to the responsibilities to children that they're going to bring into the world. Abortion is about control of mind of women, not just their bodies. It's very insidious. Blue, how do you feel about politicians making medical policy?
Well, we see the result right now, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Politicians who are writing laws that completely jeopardize lives, jeopardize further reproductive ability of women because they don't know what they're writing about and they don't know what they're talking about. They are jeopardizing the full provision of reproductive health care in many states because doctors are leaving those states. They don't want to be in jeopardy of losing their licenses, and the language of these laws is so vague. They feel that they are under threat. I will say that, we don't just impact women who for whatever reasons, are decided they are not able to have a child at this time. Even women who intended to have a child and develop problems. My mother was forced to carry a dead fetus for months, because they were unsure if it was dead. They thought so, but didn't know. And they were concerned, and they thought it would be illegal to remove it. This is the kind of thing we're talking about with these laws.
Right.
And it's really throwing, there's now things in the court, international human rights law. The U.S. is being challenged under the international rights law because of this kind of legal language that politicians have come up with in order to enforce their particular sense of morality and their need to control the lives of women.
Well, the Supreme Court just this week, it'll be last week by the time this gets on air, we're debating the idea of emergency care in the face of bans or limits on abortion in many states. And Justice Brown Jackson probably said it the best, which is that the issue has come down to when a woman's health is imperiled, although her life is not exactly at stake. So you talked about it. Her future fertility could be affected. Her physical health could be affected, and doctors are afraid because of the law to take steps that would have been sort of automatic under Roe to just do an abortion or a procedure like abortion, close enough that they're worried about being put into jail. So when I look at that, does that mean that now fetuses are more important than actual women in America or parts of America?
Well, I think that's been true in the eyes of some people for quite some time now. Only now in the eyes of the law, in places it will be interpreted in that way, and it will go way beyond abortion. We're talking about, a history now where women who used pain medications, right, during pregnancy have been brought to trial and treated as criminals because that pain medication might have caused a miscarriage. We are spreading, and the court is spreading a climate of fear and placing, as you said, the rights of a fetus, even in the very earliest stages of pregnancy, above women's health, women's rights, and it's really has a long term impact on a wide variety of healthcare areas.
Where has this come from? This idea, I'll get you in a minute, Christine. I want you to talk about this.
No, that's okay.
This idea of fetal personhood.
Yes.
An embryo should have rights, constitutionally protected rights, the same as a living, breathing, out of the womb woman. And what happened to, we used to have exceptions almost automatically for incest, for rape, for other sorts of horrendous circumstances. Those are all going away. It's because of the idea that a fetus is the same as a living, breathing person. How did we get to that, Christine?
It's been a decades-long effort on the part of this extreme, I believe, pro-life, not only politicians, but also groups that have wanted to dismantle Roe v. Wade since the very beginning. It's, and sadly, when Roe v. Wade passed the Supreme Court, I know about you guys, but I was old enough to be involved in trying to support and marched for that to hopefully be in the law of the land. But the idea that a woman has bodily autonomy, I think, goes even further, where the whole idea of the Handmaid's Tale, that's all I can keep thinking about is the Handmaid's Tale. And I read that years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it just chills me to the bone when I think about that book, because that's where we are. And that's where it started, that just this dismantling of every single gain that women have made and fought so hard for over the last, even the right to vote, the last 150 years, what we have had to go through, or women have had to go through to be part of society in a way that's meaningful. And we know that there are, what is it, still 51% of the population is women. And I don't know if that's still the case in the United States, but I know it is globally. And why half the population would be marginalized in this way and attacking their health care. I don't know why these people, I think it kind of goes back to their religious God. All of that is part of it. I think that's one of the reasons why we are maybe where we are today, because they are, in fact, a very, very strong force behind all of this, behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Religion.
I would say, though, Rosemary, first it's important to know that, when our country was founded, and for a long time into the mid 1800s, abortion was legal throughout the country. Mm-hmm. It was legal to the point of what was called quickening, right? About the 4th month of pregnancy, when there was initial movement of the fetus, it was available. And then you got a whole lot of reactionary laws coming in around the same time, the Comstock laws, and we could go back to the Comstock laws forbidding birth control. And part of the issue in addressing abortion is we don't want to deal with sex education or good birth control in our country either, and yet we want to prevent people from terminating pregnancies. But I think politically, what happens is you get a party or you get a political leader who wants power, and he sees that there is a small but very impassioned extreme group that will move their members to the polls, right? And those politicians then work at getting that movement behind them because they want to win power. It doesn't matter. They may not necessarily believe the same things as that group does. All right. So I don't particularly believe that Trump is anti-abortion. I think he wants power, and he has used the fact that there are certain groups who will get behind him and go to the vote if he promises things. If he promised to put people on the Supreme Court who would end the right to abortion, then he saw that as an advantage in gaining power. And we have politicians who will take advantage of extreme groups in order to win power, whether or not they agree with what they're saying, and give them a platform. And I think that's what we've seen in America.
Wow. Christine?
No, I agree with everything that Lou said. And just to, reinforce the fact that with the election of Trump, the courts from all levels, state levels, have been packed with these very conservative judges that he is spoon-fed and told who to pick, right? Because they are going to rule favorably, for that group to completely strip away our freedom and our bodily autonomy. And when I say our, I mean women, all women. I also, am Blue. I have sons as well, 2 sons that are about the same older than yours, and I have 4 grandchildren, 1 granddaughter, 3 grandsons. But I also have a lot of great nieces and nephews, and they are all, under the age of 10 right now. And I am just terrified for their world in this regard. And for most of them, there's all girls, pretty much, 1, 2 boys. But what is their world going to be like for them? Because all of these things that are happening surrounding stripping women from, being able to be productive members of society. There's just so much needless suffering, and the Republican lawmakers, they don't care. They don't seem concerned with the fact that Women have become are going to be having fines, and they're going to be criminalized for, and maybe jailed for ending their pregnancies. So even when it's medically necessary, it just is beyond scary. It keeps me up at night.
It occurs to me as you're talking that I have 3 sons. My theory has long been that is God's revenge on feminists, is that we get sons, but we're raising them right. And that brings us back to the theme of men, and all women, regardless of their religion or their politics, have to see this as an issue. I'm Rosemary Aramayo. I've been talking with Christine Promomo and Blue Carreker, who are longtime feminists and advocates for women's reproductive freedom. We've been talking about the history, how we got where we are now, the implications of what that is. We're going to be back in a minute to talk more about the politics of abortion. This is Rosemary, and I want you to hear now from an Albany, New York, women's cancer care physician, Dr. Heidi Godoy. Heidi, I asked you on specifically, not just because you're a doctor, although that's important, I want your perspective, but because you and I do not agree politically. Unlike really too many of my guests, you are not a liberal, you are a Trump supporter, and yet you still believe in access to abortion. Can you explain why that's important?
Wow, that's like a loaded question right out the gun.
It is.
So I would like to say that I am not a Trump supporter, but I am a Republican. I am a champion of women's health and of women's rights. And I think that in today's age, there's no better feminist than a woman providing care to other women across the country. And so I think that we are at a precipice in our country in terms of providing really good care to women, providing them the rights to their own body, to their privacy, and to care. And this is a no better platform. There is no better platform than to come on this podcast and talk about it with you, Rosemary.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have very different political views, but I think that we have the same views as it pertains to women's health, women's rights, and the access to good care.
This is not the first time, but it's certainly a very poignant time when politicians have entered into medicine. They are practicing medicine without a license. How do you feel about that?
100%. They are using terms that are not medical terms, and they're making them up. Partial birth abortion. What does that mean? At going through medical school, you don't learn those words. That's not a word. That's not a medical term. That's not terminology that we use in speaking to patients and speaking to each other. That is not. It's not even a clinical word. So, or a string. Yeah, they're all 3 words, but they're not strung together like that for us. So it's some politician made up this word and is fear mongering people so they don't understand what the actual lines when a fetus can live outside of a mother. And we're not performing abortions on babies that can live outside their mother without medical intervention. That doesn't happen, okay? And so I feel like these are very critical conversations as that line between when can a fetus live without its host, essentially, without the mother, and when does that moment of life without the mother kind of begin for that fetus. So that's really, I think, where the line is divided, and that's a very medical thing, right? And we're
Yes.
trying to put a very political spin on it so that people are not, and doctors are not making that decision with their patients.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think recently, as in a couple days ago, we're kind of waiting on a very big decision from the Supreme Court about, Roe v. Wade was really a privacy issue, right? Like a right to your own body. And now they're making it something called an EMTALA issue. EMTALA means that you have the right to medical care if you go into an emergency room. Okay, well, why did that rule come into effect? It came into effect because patients would come to the emergency room, and if they were uninsured, underinsured, hospitals could ship them to other hospitals that potentially had less resources, that potentially could care for these patients less, or just change in resources. You think about color. If patients showed up at a white hospital, quote unquote, they'd be shipped to a black hospital. So this concept of unequal access to care is really one of the cruxes of where this issue lies.
Well, where it's going to, right? Another thing that we've seen already as an effect of some really draconian abortion bans or restrictions in the country is that doctors are fleeing some places. Now, I know this is not your specialty, but can you understand why OBGYN doctors are fleeing places like Idaho?
Yeah, I think they're scared, to be very honest. They are afraid of the repercussions that potentially going to jail and being charged. I guess we're kind of hearkening back to the 50s and 60s where women have to get back alley abortions to really be able to either get good care. And we're talking about patients that medically unfit to undergo a pregnancy. And if they have a pregnancy, it will sacrifice the mother's life. And potentially you would have a fetus that couldn't even reach just like a viable gestational age. And so you have lawmakers making these decisions as opposed to medical doctors who, I spent 16 years training to kind of understand the physiology, the anatomy, and the repercussions this has on mind, body, and soul. And these are generally white men in their 50s and 60s and 70s making these laws that essentially affect women of reproductive age. And oftentimes, who is seeking out this care? It's women who are underserved, a minority, and have limited access to care. So it's not a political issue, in my opinion. It's a women's rights issue. And so whether you are Republican, Democrat, independent, you need to have the access to care at the time that you present into the system. So
can you speak to what I see as a terrible misconception that politicians need to step in to stop these flighty, silly women who are running in to have abortions of convenience? Like, oh, I don't need a kid now, I'm going to have an abortion. Is there any truth to that at all? When I look at the statistics, I see fewer and fewer women getting abortions. Usually it's because of serious health issues or economic issues or other problems that certainly warrant attention. Is that wrong?
Rosemary, I'm going to say this. If somebody wants an abortion, they have come to that decision onto themselves. And it's whether it is used as a contraceptive, it's not my job to judge anybody for that. That is number one. As a doctor, I sit there and I don't judge, okay? And I listen. And to be a good provider, you have to, yes, you can have your opinions, but you need to be able to provide available care, able care, and you need to be affable and you need to have compassion. Okay, we all took this oath to take care of patients. And so, yes, if you don't want to be an abortion provider, then you don't have to be an abortion provider. You don't have to do that. You can go and kind of do a different avenue in the medical field. But if you are a abortion provider, you understand the ramifications and you sit there non-judgmental. Okay.
Right,
And I think
right.
that, lots of kids kind of get caught up in this, right? So we're talking about people that don't understand, who are uneducated, who maybe don't understand this, how it works, the process of getting pregnant, or even, maybe somebody, got drunk and, had too much fun, or maybe they were raped. Maybe they have such a severe medical condition, they thought that they could never get pregnant, and they get pregnant on accident. So there are so many turns that this could take that, in my opinion, I think we get into a slippery slope when we decide what abortion fits our comfort, right?
Right.
So
right.
we can't be comfortable with, oh, hey, we're going to do abortion because this person was raped. No, we're going to provide this service because this is the appropriate care. This is the level of care this patient needs. And I really think it's really a right to your body and to decide if you want to do this. I'm not playing God, but it is my body, right? So when people want to say, there's a heartbeat, and we're taught that heartbeat is not kind of an option until like day 50. That's when you can see the heartbeat, but you may have a flicker of a blood movement through the fetus. We are all trying to kind of come up with this magical moment of
when it's
we
okay.
Like, so I think that is not for us to decide, because as our science improves, those numbers of heartbeat and blood flow, and I'm not quite sure what that means. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
we all need blood flow for things to grow. So I feel that it's more of a privacy issue, an access to care, and a right to kind of take over, and care for your own body. Them going down this EMTALA line is, I think, even a slippery slope. Who in the emergency room, gets to decide if you show up for an abortion?
I'm offended by the whole idea of fetal personhood, that somehow an embryo or a fetus has as many constitutional rights as a fully breathing, functional adult woman. I don't understand that at all, and I don't know how it came to that point. I have another question too. The pro-abortion lobby is saying, well, there is another alternative to abortion, and that's adoption. Just put up these children for adoption, they'll be picked up. Is that realistic? Can you describe what it's like for a 14-year-old girl to go through, for example, a full pregnancy?
It's awful. If this is an unwanted pregnancy, it will ultimately change their life. And, I'm not one to judge for the good or the bad, but what 14-year-old has the mental capacity to understand? We're not back in the time of Jesus. Okay. We're not 2,000 years ago where you were married off at 13 and had your first baby at, 14. That doesn't exist for us. It's not our cultural norm, right? To have babies, at 13, 14. Okay. So that's a very different thing. And I think when a child is having a child, you cannot in good conscience, have them endure 9.5 months of a pregnancy and then not deal with the ramifications of having a child as a child, okay, and understand that you're going to put this child up for adoption. This child's life is forever changed because of this moment.
Because of what they've gone through. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, Doctor. Is there anything else you want to say as we close out?
As a cancer provider, it's very important to understand the rights available to our patients as well. If I am unable to provide cancer care because it may cause harm to a fetus, really also kind of permeates our landscape. In patients that have molar pregnancies, which are abnormal pregnancies that will never result in a fetus or even a child being born. You're kind of, handcuffing me and just caring for these patients, in addition to patients that end up pregnant and may have a large cervical cancer, and they need active treatment for their cervical cancer. And in treating the cervical cancer, sometimes the radiation that you would treat them with will kill the fetus. So am I going to be concerned about being charged with, manslaughter? So I think that there are deep rooted issues. I think that, I belong to this physicians moms group. It's called PMG and it's on Facebook. And this has kind of become in the forefront of our conversations that we have and our concerns about being providers in this field. And it trumps your politics. It really does, because as caregivers to women, and as people who are compassionate and really want the best for our patients, as mothers, as sisters, as daughters, we are being limited in what we can do, and our hands are being tied. And so I am fearful we've gone back in time, 40, 50 years in our capacity, and then the subsequent flip of this coin is to discuss then, we can't end life, but we can start life with IVF, right? So we can start something in a petri dish and we can, grow that. And so where's our end point? Where's our slippery slope where we can say, all right, well, we can start life, but we can't end life. So,
well, the new laws seem to be endangering IVF treatment as well.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that happen already. Special steps have to be taken. Contraception is in question too. The way abortions, even when permitted, are performed, are in question now with the Comstock Act could stop shipment of pills. We're already on that slippery slope, I would say.
So then, you have to realize that these pills also are not just used to provide abortion. They're used to treat women who have heavy bleeding, to treat women, so they have other indications as well. So if we're going to limit that, we're going to limit medical treatment for other patients as well. So these laws made by people who are not doctors, who do not have advanced medical degrees, are really,
and who are not women too often. I'm sorry, and who are not women as well. They're making decisions about this. Yeah, it's shocking. You've been listening to Dr. Heidi Godoy, who is a women's cancer care provider in Albany, New York. She is not like me, a liberal. She is a Republican and a conservative, but we think the same about this issue. It's a women's rights issue. Thank you so much, Heidi. I appreciate it. This is Rosemary again. I want you to hear now from an old colleague on the round table, Malia Du Mont. She is a top administrator at Bard College, former military, but mostly I've asked her on because I've never heard anyone defend the need for access to abortion as strongly, as fiercely as she has. So welcome, Malia. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Okay, so why does this topic mean so much to you? And if I can get you to speak just without a question, without prompting, just tell me why you think this is important.
Yeah, it's about my autonomy over myself, basically. I believe that I own my own body, and I believe that I own every part of my body. And the way the abortion debate has been developing, it singles out one specific part of women's bodies, their uterus, as something that women do not have full control over. And I find that demeaning beyond description. and a form of institutionalized government condescension of an entire gender. So yeah, I'm outraged by it. And that's pretty much it.
So you're not surprised then by the reaction of outrage that we've seen from women across the country. And this is regardless of age, of state of motherhood or not, outrage from Republicans as well as Democratic women. That does not surprise you.
Right. No, it doesn't at all. I mean, I'm not a mother myself. I'm not planning to become a mother. And I know like that motivates some people around this, but for me, like that's not what personally makes me the angriest. And I think the reason that so many people from different situations and walks of life are outraged is because it comes back to this basic idea of bodily autonomy.
Right.
And frankly, I don't understand people who are surprised by the outrage. And it's, maybe like I just, if they would just stop and think for a second, like what it would be like to be in this position of suddenly having the government decide they should control an internal part of your own private mechanism.
Right. I get it. Do you think that Republicans are underestimating the outrage of women voters?
I don't think so entirely. I mean, I think there's a little bit of wishful thinking in certain parts of the Republican Party, like that this won't rise, that they'll be able to focus on other issues like the border and immigration, because those are issues where they feel strongest. But I think one of the lessons from Arizona is that Republicans understand, and I think even Trump's state political director in Arizona has said, like, this is not a good issue for Republicans. And so, like, whether or not they agree personally with the issue, they realize strategically it's not a good thing for them. And that even for independents have been shown to trust Biden more on this issue. So
it's interesting to me that the Republicans do have an awareness that, they're going to look bad on this. So their method has been to A, not talk about abortion at all, or B, to temper it with phony language like leave it up to the states, or we have to reach a consensus. I think that was Nikki Haley's. Surely we can come at some time that we all agree on. Is that a method you see working among women voters?
Not in a widespread way. I mean, some people may agree in principle with the idea, leave it up to the states. Like that sounds good in theory to a conservative. But then when leave it up to the states means you're going back to an 1800s law from Arizona, suddenly people realize, wait a minute. But then even a lot of Republicans would say, well, it's fine. They're fixing it in Arizona. So it wasn't a problem to leave it up to the states because they're still able to fix it. So I don't think they're going to back away from that tactic. Also because it's been a really successful tactic for Republicans in pushing forward more stringent access to abortion on a state by state basis. So even though they realize that they're like in a large strategic sense, this is a losing issue for them. When they send it out to the states, there may be pockets of huge problems like Arizona, but by and large, it's working for them in a lot of other places.
Okay, are we on a slippery slope, Malia? Do you see this, what we have done so far, dropping Roe v. Wade, enacting the draconian measures in some states? Do you see that on the way to a national abortion ban or to further restrictions on, say, contraception?
I don't think that we're going to get to a place where there's a national abortion ban. Certainly, there are a lot of people who are very vocal about wanting that. But I just can't imagine that would happen. Also because it goes against the whole Republican strategy of leaving it up to the states. So I think they know, like there's certain people that for sort of optics reasons are going to continue to call for that. But I just don't see it getting much traction at all.
Okay, so not a threat.
But further restriction to contraceptions, possibly. Like but again, like, I think that would happen on this, that already is happening on a state by state basis.
Sure. As we talk about, and the optic we talk about is parental rights in school. You're seeing the end. It's already been restricted, but you're seeing an end to sex education in many schools. Then there's restrictions coming or in place on contraception and no abortion. This is it's getting like Gilead. It's getting scary. One last question. You're an outraged woman. This is very much part of our politics right now. It'll play into the election. What can a woman do? What should pro-abortion women be doing?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't recommend what my initial impetus was, but I'll just share it with your listening audience. Just so everyone's heard of this effort, Take Back the Night. Right, that there have been marches for years that women's rights activists march to take back the night, and that's been an effort to sort of fight back against violence against women in general.
Right.
And when Roe was overturned, I felt like I needed to take back my body. It was a similar kind of thing. How can I take back my body from this government overreach? And I thought, well, the only way to do it literally is to get rid of the thing that the government wants, my uterus. So I talked to some doctors about, could I get a voluntary hysterectomy? Because I thought, like, if this is, it felt like in a way they're trying to turn the uterus into some kind of dog chip, like a tracking device for women, And I'm like, well, I don't want that. And so if that's the issue, then they can have my uterus. I just don't need it to be part of me. So I looked into that, and long story short, it's not really practical. No doctor is gonna just do this unless I don't know, I go to some really disreputable place, which I don't want to do. But that would, like, I was seriously, like, that was the level of outrage I felt and that was the like, that felt like the only real avenue open to me to make sure that the government cannot tell me what to do with my own body. Now, again, that's not really an option. I don't recommend it. That's not something that lots of women should do, but maybe we could come up with symbolic things, like in my mind, I imagine getting this uterus, and of course, if I had it taken out, they're not going to give it to me, right? But I imagined putting it in a box with a big pink bow on the top, and delivering it, to Mitch McConnell's office, or something really sort of dramatic, like here. But people could you can create a symbolic uterus and show up en masse and to hand them over. Like this is the level of craziness that the government is driving us to consider.
It's not just crazy, it's cruel. I mean, I've been reading about women. We basically have criminalized miscarriage, which is a very common occurrence.
Yes.
It's now dangerous. Childbirth is dangerous now in this country. Yeah.
And
it's
so on a more practical note, though, I mean, other than just symbolic things, what can women do? I mean, obviously vote, but I think to be really mindful of efforts to turn the abortion issue into something else, and keep it alive, and really continue to question candidates specifically about what do you stand for, and how would you respond to a national abortion ban, and really try to hold candidates accountable and make sure they know that this is a do or die issue for them. It's not optional, right? They can't step around it. So I think that's something that women can well, everyone who cares about women
Right.
can very easily do.
Right. We started in the 1970s. It was Nixon who made abortion an issue in the first place because he wanted the evangelical vote. I didn't think it belonged in politics then. I especially don't think it belongs in politics now. This is a matter between a woman, her doctor, her partner, her family, people she wants to involve, not the government.
And evangelicals, it wasn't such a rallying issue for evangelicals until politicians decided to turn it into one for political reasons.
This is Richard Nixon's, his legacy. We see it again. You've been listening to Malia Du Mont, an administrator at Bard College, an old colleague from WAMC's Roundtable. Thank you so much. I appreciate your being on. Welcome back to On the Brink. I'm Rosemary Armeo. I'm speaking with Christine Promomo and Blue Carreker, longtime feminist as I am, and outspoken activist for reproductive rights for women, which could not be more imperiled. So we're seeing a lot of speeches, appearances, ads. I think, Christine, you sent me one by Kamala Harris, who is not just a vice president, but she's become the spokeswoman for Biden's abortion efforts. How do you think she's doing? Blue first.
All right, this is a harder one for me to ask because I am not as aware of Kamala's, talk on this issue. I'm glad to hear that she's doing that and hope that she's doing it in a stronger way. But I don't have a lot of comment because I have not heard her comments about that.
How about the Biden administration in general? They've been kind of lackluster, and they were from the minute that the decision on Dobbs leaked. You remember that? Nearly six months before the 2022 decision that really did do the dumping. But we knew then, and I've not seen new action. I've not seen policy initiatives. I've not seen legislative action. Not that he really has a lot of hope in the Congress that we have now, but the feminists are a little bit disappointed in Democrats.
Well, I was disappointed in Democrats starting when Bill Clinton started saying, and Hillary Clinton started saying abortion should be rare and they started apologizing when they spoke. Apologizing and implying that women should feel shame or guilt and only, go to abortion as a last minute. As soon as they began that rhetoric, I felt they were pulling away from what should be a basic human right for women to control their reproductive lives. And I felt they have never stepped forward with the strength and conviction that women have needed.
All right, Christine, I'm going to give you the floor in a minute, but I also want to bash Barack Obama, who had the majority. Here is a person who could have actually encoded a Roe v. Wade as law, where it would not be subject to a rigged Supreme Court now dumping it. And he didn't do it because he didn't think it was a priority, didn't think it was a real danger. That was pretty short-sighted. And I also am mad at Hillary, although I'm a big Hillary supporter, when she allowed third trimester abortion to become an issue in her debate with Trump. That is not an issue. That is a rare and horrible procedure that no one enters into wantonly, like, oh, I suddenly don't want a baby. You only do that when there's a serious health risk to the mother or to the child, the fetus, and that should be a decision for the woman, her doctor, and possibly her family, but not politicians. And Hillary let Donald Trump talk about that. Awful. So now I'm going to give you the floor, Christine, because I know you've been concerned with this for a while. How do you think Kamala's doing? How do you think the Biden administration overall is doing? What should they be doing?
Well, I have seen a few and watched some of the speeches that Kamala gave. She did go to Arizona recently. She's been out in some of the other swing states and talking about the issue of women's reproductive freedom. I agree that they hadn't really focused, and I don't know that anyone or any campaign would really think that this overturning of Roe v. Wade would become such a top of the whole issues that is facing the country in this election. So maybe I'm not excusing it, but maybe that's why there wasn't a focus. However, I think now that's changed. There is coming up, there's the Biden-Harris campaign is having a webinar Zoom next week about reproductive freedom and what we need to do. Indivisible groups around the country are focused on this now, and I think pushing the Biden-Harris campaign and other Democrats to get behind this. I do know this, I did sign up myself because this Indivisible Zoom has some really interesting focus that, they have who we have to convince. It's not people like us. There's going to be that segment of the population that will never, not vote for Trump, no matter what he does or says. But they're focusing their actions, which I'm interested to see what they're going to do, on what they're calling the double haters. And they make up about a fifth of the electorate in the population. It's both sides, Republican, Democrat. And these are the people they're calling the ones that are unsatisfied with both Trump and Biden. But the data that they seem to have is that this is one issue, one area, reproductive freedom, where all these folks are united. So I'm glad to see that, and this will absolutely push, I think, the Biden campaign to become more outspoken on this, because we do know that I agree with the whole Clinton, the safe, legal, rare argument. That was just a workaround. That was a very political statement on his part. He was a very savvy politician, as we know. He conserved the conservatives even during his reign. I think. Now though, at the time, I guess we thought that was a really a good pro-rights, phrase that was coined by him. But, today we do know that, that implies that there's something shameful about, having this procedure. And a lot of people were kept, stayed in the pro-choice arena, because of that statement. And right now,
I'm going to interrupt now because I want you.
Not the thing we're interested in, right? We don't want to be appeased. We just have to go for broke here, and have to make this somehow, even though Roe v. Wade's no longer the law of the land. Hopefully there'll be another mechanism to do this. We cannot give in. We can't give an inch.
Okay, I want you to switch a minute and talk about Republicans. Have they underestimated the anger and power of women on this issue? We've seen Kansas, for example, vote in favor of abortion access. The polls are overwhelmingly in favor of, at least with some abortion access, much more reasonable than we're getting. And when I look at it, the Arizona Republicans just rescinded their ridiculous Civil War era, a law, anti-abortion law that predated women even being able to vote. So are they getting savvy? They're now saying they're not even talking about abortion. They don't want to bring people's memory back to that issue. Or they're saying, well, let the states decide, Donald Trump. Blue, do you think they're getting it? Or can they get around that? Can they fool the electorate by not talking directly about abortion?
Well, I think they're scared because of what women have done in states where they have a ballot initiative and where they are in states where they can at least try to push back and implement, as in New York State, protections. So they are aware of that, and the Democrats are aware of that. As I said before, I think a lot of our male politicians in particular, they look at what's going to move blocks of voters to their camp. All right. And it's not so much their opinion on the issue, it's who's going to get somebody to the polls. And right now, reproductive justice, not just abortion, is moving women to the polls. And Republicans are legitimately, and they need to be worried about that. I just came from Ireland, and Ireland has freedom of abortion. All right,
I know.
Catholic country.
That was an incredible change in Ireland when that was made the law of the land there. We have to do the same. But also, where these states now that, these stories where they've had these bans and restrictions that have undermined, women's ability to have maternal care, where there's, even though there's exceptions in some of the states for rape or incest or, some fetal abnormalities that could happen, or even a mom's in danger, the exceptions are supposed to give the medical providers the ability to take care of them. But, in those states, they also create this punitive legal environment. So for any medical procedure in that regard. So really, what they've done is, it doesn't matter how many exceptions they write, all these things. Right. They aren't going to make any difference because they've created this world where healthcare providers are just not going to perform any procedures. And, right. I don't think the Republicans care about this at all. I mean, that issue, that part of it, the needless suffering that happens as a result. I mean, we've already seen in states like in Florida, Rosemary, where you said you have family, there was a woman who found out her fetus had no heartbeat. When she went to the hospital, they turned her away. And, she ended up dying because she ended up
carrying that baby for months. The baby was born and lived for 90 minutes. They had to suffer the heartache, watch that child die in agony. It was a child after birth, and then pay for a funeral on top of everything else. It's so cruel. And yes, I have a daughter-in-law in Florida, and she's in her 30s, and they would like to have a family, but she is not going to get pregnant while she's living in that state. She's afraid of the implications. What if something happened? What if the baby had a deformity, which, as you know, the chances increase the older you are. In Florida, she would not get care. So it is definitely a worry that exists for women who are not yet mothers or pregnant. Yeah,
exactly. And
I'm very afraid of a national abortion ban, and I think that's a possibility. If we're just a few seats away from Republican control of the White House and of the Senate, the House is in play. We are close enough that, consider that if there is a national ban on abortion, then all the protections that Governor Hochul and governors in other states have put into place, that all melts away and abortion becomes illegal. Can you see that happening? And what would happen if we've been in that situation before? In the 70s, we're in that position. Mm-hmm. Abortions won't stop. So how does it happen? We play with pills. The Supreme Court wants. The Supreme Court wants.
Oh, they're already trying. They're already trying with the pills for sure. Yeah, go ahead, Blue. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I mean, certainly the fact that mifepristone and misoprostol are both available out there will, give. Even if it's not legal, there will be a very extensive and thorough underground network so that people can get medication abortions. You will have the same thing that you had before Roe. You will have people who have the means traveling to other countries, to Canada, to England, to Ireland, to places where they can get them. And you will have huge demonstrations in the streets. But many people will suffer, and particularly low-income women will suffer and die or lose their reproductive ability if this goes into place.
Wow. It's just terrifying to me. We have run out of time, and I could just go on talking on this. You guys were great. I want to give you one last chance to either tell me something about something we didn't bring up, or a question I've long thought of. I don't know that I have a good answer yet. But if you were to talk one-on-one, polite, all rules of, public discourse, you're not yelling at each other, to a woman who is as rabidly pro-life as you are pro-choice, what would you say to them to try to persuade them to change their mind? Blue, what might you say?
Right. I've had a number of these conversations.
It's not hypothetical.
So I would often start by, talking about, their love of family, their love of their children, their mothers. How important is it to them that they are able to make a healthy family? Do they understand the implications of these laws for women, for their daughters, for their granddaughters, who may want to have children? And are they ready to criminalize this to the extent, are they going to start sending women to prison, right? Are they going to start banning OBGYN practice? Are they going to start sending women to jail because they have a glass of wine while they're pregnant? Just how far down this line are they going to go? And how is that going to impact the women that they care about? Their children, their grandchildren, their mothers.
Mm-hmm. Christine, your turn.
Absolutely. But I don't know how this happened. It wasn't by design. Every person in my life that I'm close to or know, they're all pro-choice. And so I haven't really had to speak to anyone yet. But I think what I would say would be, to someone that is as firm, right to abortion, anti-abortion activist, or a person that lack of access to, safe and respectful abortion care is really a public health and human rights issue. It's something that, if we are not able to have the access to quality abortion care, it does violate our rights as women. Our rights to be able to work, to be able to decide freely and responsibly on how we want our children and our families to grow, and our freedom from cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatments and punishment. There's, as you said, Blue, women will still have abortions. They may be very unsafe for the majority of women who may need to have them. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what I would say.
I would also emphasize, Rosemary, I do not believe that the majority of women in this country are against abortion. It's a very small minority, especially who are in favor of the extreme laws that have been passed now by men on the Supreme Court. Okay, there is a strong and passionate minority, but it is not the majority of women in this country, and never has been.
Yeah, that's true. I've thought of this question because I have a mother who's Italian, Catholic, had 5 kids, would have had more if her body had let her. She believes that abortion is murder. Mm-hmm. And I'm not exactly sure that she isn't right. She well may be right. However, nothing about the laws on abortion that I want to see passed, on Roe v. Wade being reinstated, forces you to have an abortion. If you think like that, you don't have to have one. But Why do you have the right to decide what other women who don't think the same as you, who are not raised Italian and Catholic, why do you have the right to make them do what you want? That's, to me, it's about personal choice. And I hate the expression pro-choice because it kind of hides what we're really talking about, which is pro-abortion.